right, I think we're gonna get started for our September Lunch and Learn. Welcome to all board members, administrators, and business managers. Thank you for joining us for the September Lunch and Learn. In today's session, Chris Ann Norby-Johnner from the Vogel Law Firm will be discussing business manager evaluations. Just a couple quick announcements before we begin. If at any time during the presentation you would like to ask a question, you can do so by clicking the Q&A icon at the bottom of your screen and typing your question in the box. We won't be monitoring the chat closely, so we ask that you please use the Q&A box to ask your questions. We will be recording today's webinar and posting it to the NDSBA website under the Resources tab. If it is also being live streamed to our NDSBA YouTube page. I'm now going to hand it over to Chris Ann to begin our presentation. Thanks, Chris Ann, for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I always like hopping on for these things. As was mentioned, I'm going to talk about business manager evaluations. As I'm going through today, if my slides don't advance or you can't hear me, just send me a quick shout out and I'll fix it on my technology, my end with the technology. Today we're going to talk a little bit about the business manager position first, because I think obviously ground zero for determining where you want to go with an evaluation process is really understanding what is expected of your business manager. Then we're going to talk a little bit about performance management and documentation that should be ongoing and occurring throughout the year and is really something that needs to be done on an ongoing basis before you get to the evaluation piece. And then we'll actually get to the topic, which is performance evaluation and what that might look like. I'll talk a bit about employee separation since it is unique for a business manager position. And then just some extra recognition that can always be done for your employees and your business managers throughout the year. So that's our agenda. It might not take the full hour, but I'll watch for questions as well as we go along, and I can certainly answer questions at the end. So starting with the business manager position itself, what is the role of your business manager? Well, first and foremost, as those listening are probably aware, your business manager, like your superintendent, they are employed directly by the board. They report to the school board, not a member of your school board, but they're at your school board meetings, and they have a direct reporting relationship to the school board. Your business manager is going to act as the treasurer, handling the activities fund and other monies that come in throughout the year. Your business manager, at the most simplest piece of their position, also keep the meeting minutes and all the documentations for the district and maintains those open records, and very likely is pretty involved in responding to open records requests, maintaining the records, financial and other, for the district. That is kind of the basic overview of the role. But the business manager position is really rooted in our Century Code. So there are statutory requirements of your business manager, regardless of what school district you're in, that are required of that person that's filling this position. And 15.107-21, I have just copied and pasted it and underlined a few of the key provisions. But this, when you're looking at evaluating your business manager, this is almost ground zero. This is where you look to first to see what is my business manager at my school supposed to be doing. Like I said, keeping a true and accurate record of those board proceedings, holding the books and records, preparing and submitting an annual report to the board and the county superintendent of schools, preparing negotiable instruments as directed by the board, performing any other duties identified in the Century Code, and there are quite a few for a business manager, performing those duties that would be required by the board, meaning those that the board may specifically direct and ask the business manager to do throughout the year. Overall, keeping a true and accurate list of the financial records in the district, submitting the financial reports to the school board quarterly or more often if the school board may direct. Some business managers will give financial reports at every single regular meeting. You should always encourage and have your business manager having ongoing conversations in your open meetings about the financial report and the view for the district. And it often happens on more than a quarterly basis, but under Century Code, at a minimum has to happen on a quarterly basis. Produce all financial records of the district when directed to do so by the board. So if the board wants an update, the board wants to see where the district is financially, they direct the business manager to produce that, and the business manager has an obligation under the law to do so. Maintain custody of all money that comes into the business manager's hands. That's a big responsibility. Paying out the money that is in the business manager's control when directed by the board, and then receiving and maintaining custody of money to which the district or the board is entitled. Those are the statutory provisions that almost give your business manager their job duties, their job description, okay? So that's one piece of the Century Code that the board should always look when they're thinking of evaluating the business manager and what should my business manager be doing. Your school district business manager has to have a bond. The form which is really just a form of insurance that pays school district a settlement depending on the coverage limits that the district takes out on that bond in the event that your business manager were to misappropriate or use money in a wrongful manner. Given the nature of a business manager position and the importance of that position to a school district, the money they're dealing with, the stakeholders, the taxpayers, these bonds are really just a safeguard for the district. That's required. 15.107-24 talks again about safekeeping of all district funds unless otherwise provided by the law. That business manager is responsible for this and is responsible for maintaining that general account of the district's receipts, expenditures, itemized accounts for each class of receipts unless otherwise directed by the superintendent of public instruction. So again, an emphasis throughout the Century Code on accurate record keeping that is a major duty of your business manager. And then again, that activities fund, which I mentioned earlier, school districts have to have the activities fund to support the school's extracurricular activities. It's the business manager that deposits the receipts from the extracurricular activities fund into the activities fund. There should be monthly reports of the receipts, expenditures, and balances from the activities fund. That is under statute supposed to be occurring monthly. The negotiable instruments. Some districts adopt a policy on this. Policy is a good idea to have when you're looking at disbursement of money and that disbursement by your business manager, your superintendent, etc. The board may adopt a policy on disbursement. That most policies include the authorization, the creation, the approval process for negotiable instruments. Okay, when you're contracting, entering into work agreements, different things with vendors, with others. The policy generally addresses the use of credit and debit cards, invoice payments, the use of petty cash, the option to disperse payments electronically, signatures, etc. If there is no policy in place in your district, then the business manager must disperse money only by the issuance of a negotiable instrument upon a bill or an invoice received as authorized by the board as long as the money is available. So policy is always a really good place to start when you're looking at how money is coming into the district, going out of the district, how bills are being paid, etc. And then is your business manager complying with that policy? That's part of their performance obligations as you're moving towards evaluation. And then when you look at employing the business manager, I bring it back to, again, a reminder that this is a relationship between your school board and your business manager. It's a unique employment relationship, unlike others in the district. All decisions regarding the selection and employment of a school district business manager and all decisions regarding the suspension and dismissal of a school district business manager belong to the board of a school district as set forth in 15.109-33. And I'll talk about the dismissal process at the end of the presentation, but this is a reminder that the reason, we even talk to school board members about evaluating your business managers because, again, this is a relationship directly between the board and the business manager, and it's your duty to employ them and oversee their employment. The board shall exercise administrative oversight with respect to the school district business manager unless the board has established an alternative structure where the board might delegate the day-to-day supervision to the superintendent. That can happen through policy, but it doesn't negate the board's responsibility to have the ultimate oversight over the employment of the business manager. Day-to-day operations certainly could be collaborated or overseen by your superintendent, but it really is the board's responsibility to be evaluating, overseeing the business manager, determining when to retain or separate from a business manager, et cetera. And then the third piece is that all financial reports, again, whether statutorily mandated or requested by the board, since the board has the authority to request financial reports at any time from its business manager, they must be personally presented to the board by the school district business manager. The fact that this is written into our Century Code, this requirement that the business manager produce financial reports, shows the importance of that, the transparency that's required by the business manager to the board, and the oversight function the board has to ensure that the business manager is doing his or her job correctly and maintaining appropriate accounting, appropriate logs, appropriate reports throughout the year. It's important in practice, it's important in the Century Code, and that's why we see it written so often. There are other duties, of course, assigned or required by your business manager. Obviously, business managers have a very big role in the election process, a role with the bonds, the levies, the special reserve fund. Just logistically, most business managers and districts have a pretty important role in assisting the board president or superintendent or both in preparing meeting agendas, notices, providing materials and board packets because they are the custodian of records. And then various different employment benefit payroll matters. Sometimes that comes back to your business manager. It depends on the district. It depends on the workforce that the district has in place. Again, meeting minutes absolutely are kept by your business manager. They should be simple. The business manager shouldn't do any editorializing, must record attendance and votes, and should file those notes in chronological order, make available for reference at other meetings. When a board wants to refer back to something that occurred at a past meeting, it is good practice that the business manager has those notes readily available so that he or she can confirm what occurred at a past meeting. And of course, he or she often or does handle the publications that might be required in a newspaper for meeting notices, meeting minutes, whatever is required in your district per the election process. Open records maintenance. I work with a lot of business managers on open records requests and answering those types of open records questions. And just in general, a good business manager, a well-performing business manager is familiar with North Dakota Century Code, doesn't have it memorized, doesn't, not a walking legal encyclopedia, but knows where to find certain provisions or knows when to seek legal counsel for certain questions. Most business managers are pretty well in tune with Robert's Rules of Orders to assist your school board during their meetings. And the Attorney General's office has some really great manuals, including the Open Records Manual and the Open Meeting Manual that are really good for your business manager to keep on hand because it helps guide their role and in being custodian of records in a district and answering. And those guides give just some really, really fantastic advice about open meetings, open notices, open records, anything. And so when your business manager has those manuals or is familiar with them, it's always a good thing to recommend. They're easily available online. So after you understand what's required of the business manager, then you look at what performance management and documentation might look like for your business manager throughout the year. A school board's general functions at the highest level are generally planning and goal setting, policy making. They can serve in a judicial capacity, hearing facts and controversy, making decisions about contract non-renewals for teachers and administration discharges, student suspensions, expulsions. They might play a role in those processes. But this is their fourth function when it comes to your superintendent in a school district and your business manager, and that's appraisal and evaluation. This is an important board function. And when I say performance management and that it comes before evaluation, that's because you should always be observing what's occurring with your business manager throughout the year and honestly addressing problems as they arise. Evaluation isn't something that should just happen once or twice a year and you only handle issues at those given meetings or on those given dates. Performance management means as a board, you are on top of what's happening in your district with your business manager at all times. At the beginning of a school year or fiscal year or whatever it is for your district, it's good to sit down with your business manager and discuss goals and objectives for the business manager, him or herself, for her role, financially for the district, all of those things, and set some expectations of the business manager's role moving into the school year. Developing systems and procedures to measure employee behaviors and results. That could be, required check-ins with the board president, required check-ins with superintendent or collaboration with superintendent, whatever that be, but just systems and procedures throughout the year so that others are involved in knowing what the business manager is doing and working on and whether or not he or she is meeting goals and objectives. Coaching and feedback throughout the year is important. And then, only then, at the very end, do you evaluate performance? And I have a question that says, should this be done in an open meeting or done by the board president? Well, I'll talk about this and emphasize this too, especially when we get to the evaluation process. But obviously, anytime you are coaching your business manager, setting goals and objectives as a full board with a quorum of the board, that has to be done in an open meeting. All personnel matters have to be discussed in open meeting. However, if the goals and objectives as a board, you decide, well, we just want our board president to sit down with our business manager and work one-on-one and then report back to the board. Well, the one-on-one meeting with a board president and a business manager, that does not have to be done in open meeting. That would not be a quorum necessarily, and assuming that they wouldn't discuss the exact same topics and board member would then go off and discuss that multiple times, which would circumvent open meeting law, but one-on-one coaching can occur. The board president could report back to the full board in open meeting. There's absolutely transparency in the process, and the public has a right to know the discussions on a performance level that you're having with your business manager, but some of the goal and objective setting and check-ins could be done with board president, or like I said, with superintendent. That would not have to be done necessarily in open meeting, but if there were a quorum involved, then of course it would be open meeting. And I'll emphasize that again, especially when we get into the actual evaluation. Performance management versus the evaluation is that management, like I said, is ongoing. It looks at progress steps, planning, goal setting, and there wouldn't be nothing wrong with having this be, especially the goal setting and planning and open meeting with your full board, with your business manager. I think sometimes the word evaluation even can have a scary or a negative connotation, but it really shouldn't. Evaluation and planning for performance throughout a year should be in a positive manner, should be something that you're working towards together to make sure the district has a successful year. But the actual evaluation itself, separate from management, is that one-time event that's short-term, more correction-oriented, looking at assigned ratings throughout, looking at assigned ratings at that particular moment in time. And there's also a question that says, if a business manager is temporarily contracted until a permanent business manager is hired, would they still assume the duties of preparing agendas, meeting minutes, et cetera? Yeah, I would say yes. Having a business manager in place, even in a temporarily contracted position, which happens if there's a gap in service and someone's willing to step in, they're going to have the same duties required of them, assuming that they are being contracted to fill that business manager position in its entirety until a replacement comes. And those are just statutory obligations. Setting goals for the year. Again, that's when you look back at those statutorily required duties that I spent the first half of this, or first quarter of this presentation talking about. Looking at internal district policies that affect your business manager or require something in particular of your business manager, and then other assigned duties that you may have asked of your business manager in a particular year, right? When you're looking at setting goals, that's what you're looking at. What am I asking of my business manager this year? And then having that open conversation, which could be, like I said, with the full board or board president, however the board wants to set that up. It's a mutually agreed upon goal conversation, looking at milestones, check-in dates, and then directing your business manager to communicate any changes, redirection in goals for the year in a timely manner. This is really all about communication. I could as much call it performance communication as I'm calling it performance management. Asking for transparency from your business manager, good communication, that sort of thing. Providing continuous feedback, that's important for any employee. It doesn't matter if it's your business manager or someone else. Reading a negative comment or a correction in a performance evaluation at the end of a year, for example, really shouldn't be the first time your employee is hearing this. There shouldn't be anything surprising in an evaluation. The employee should have known about it. It should have been communicated in the moment. That's just good practice. It can be obviously more complicated when this is not a direct one person supervisor, one employee role, and you have a full board overseeing the business manager. That open meeting question always comes into play. So when I say coaching and assisting and redirecting, if the business manager is not meeting standards, well, you might have one board member feeling the business manager is not meeting standards, and you might have another board member who feels, completely differently, right? So I do recognize that it's complex when you're looking at a full board, giving this type of coaching throughout the year. But it still has to happen as long as you're doing it correctly with open meeting rules, meaning if this is a full board discussion about something mid-year and feedback you want to give a business manager, then if there's a quorum, it needs to be an open meeting versus something one board member has seen and wants to talk about privately with the business manager, not necessarily something that's going to go to the full board. Conversations can happen one-on-one, but when it needs to be elevated to the full board, it is open meeting. And when I talk about documentation, that comes into, another complexity with being a school district and having a full board and a public employee, right? Documents are often open records. It doesn't mean that every document goes into a personnel file, but it may. And in general, whenever looking at performance, what are things you want to document or keep track of in a year? You want to keep track of the good things, right? I'm sure that school districts on this call right now have some really fantastic business managers, and that's awesome. And when you're looking toward, I know I have to give an evaluation a couple months from now, you want to remember what you want to say, right? So kind of tracking awards, certifications, trainings your business manager might have completed, certifications that they have proactively sought, which only benefit the district, all wonderful things. If there are the bad things, you need to kind of watch those as well. Performance deficiencies, obviously legal violations, policy violations, the big problems, misappropriation of funds, incompetence in job performance, that sort of thing. Those are things that should be watched throughout the year. The form of documents focusing on the conduct or event and objective terms, on the actual performance itself, looking toward expectations moving forward, inviting responses. This is more of the conversation you would have or documentation you might be doing as a full board with your business manager. But again, and I will keep emphasizing, of course, personnel matters that are being discussed by the full board are an open meeting. This is just a measure to track what you want to say in the final evaluation. Why is documentation a good idea and helpful for me when I'm defending a district? Well, bottom line, it shows a legitimate non-discriminatory reason for a future employment decision if a lawsuit is filed. I need something to go on when a board makes a decision that could be controversial. Also, sometimes verbal is not enough. Employees take what they want to hear sometimes as they want to hear it, and there can be miscommunication on what was actually said and what was understood. It can give that proof. And employee improvement is always the goal. And as I said, negative comments or termination should never be a surprise. And good documentation or note-taking will support the performance evaluation in the end. And you also need to know as board members, when to seek counsel if you are, fortunate enough to have a person in your district designated to human resource matters or legal matters, or if you use administration for these types of for purposes. But your red flag issues with any employee, business manager or not, are going to be discrimination issues or claims that have been alluded to or made, accommodations that may have been alluded to or requested under the ADA, which would be medical, or Title VII, which could be religious, FMLA leave issues, if your business manager is going to be taking a longer leave of absence, wage and hour concerns, audit concerns, or any other questions under federal or state law, that those start arising and you feel like they're intersecting with performance in some manner. Each one of these bulleted items can be a red flag moment where you might need some counsel as a district, because you have to be very, very careful how you evaluate someone's performance, separate from some of these protected class categories. And so you just need to know when to take a breath and seek some counsel. And there's a lot of support for your business managers out there. I talked about it a little bit earlier with just being familiar with Century Code and Robert's Rule of Order and open record manuals that the Attorney General's office provides. And internally, they have support from the North Dakota Association of School Business Managers. The NDSBA, I know, can at times, lend some support to your business managers or your board president who might have a question via the business manager. There are resources out there that will help guide your business manager, especially if you have somebody that is really new to the role, certainly qualified, but being a business manager at a school district is not like anything else that they may have come from. Try to support new business managers, in particular, as they're trying to figure out what their role is, what's required of them, and what supports they have in the state, because there are great supports in the state for your business managers. So the performance management, or as I said, could be called performance communication summary, is just that it differs in form and frequency of the actual evaluation itself. It's a throughout the year type of process, and it's just setting expectations for performance with your business manager, and the requirement that the board wants transparency and communication with its business manager as a continuing process throughout the year. Boards that have good communication and good relationships with their business managers are in a much better position. Then you get to the actual performance evaluation, which is actually what I was asked to talk about, and it took me a half an hour to get there. But why do a performance evaluation? Well, the law doesn't require an evaluation for your business manager, unlike the requirements you have for teachers and requirements you have for principals and superintendents and your licensed professionals. But doing a performance evaluation for your business manager is only going to help support that board relationship. It's also going to provide oversight on those financial and open record requirements and obligations under the Century Code. And it's just flat out good practice for all employment relationships. A typical performance evaluation process might look something like this: documentation and or communication throughout the year, setting those goals, having performance management notes, having the employee do some self-assessment, having individual board members fill out individual eval forms, having the performance evaluation meeting in an open meeting, allowing the business manager to comment and have open communication with the board, and then saving the eval on a personnel file. I mean, that is just a very high level process that could be followed. But that is just something that the board has to think about. Like I said, unlike with teachers and superintendent evaluations and principal evaluations that might already be very well established in your districts and have very set processes that you follow, the business manager might be, something different or something new, or maybe it's not that different. I don't know. But the board has the discretion in setting the format process and could decide whether or not it wants to do a business manager evaluation process like it would for its superintendent, for example. So boards should, consider how many evaluations would you be giving your business manager? Would it be one? Would it be two, like a superintendent, receives more that formulative one earlier in the year in November, and then the final eval in March? Are you going to do something similar like that? Are you going to follow the same type of timing that you would for your superintendent? What is the evaluation form going to look like? Would it be something similar that you would do for your superintendent? Is this something that you would delegate to the board president to put together a format and hand out to the board? And then filling out the evaluations. Is that going to be something each board member fills out? That's generally what you would do for your superintendent. Each board member would fill out an evaluation and then compile comments into a collective eval form. Is that what you're going to do for your superintendent? And then if the comments are compiled, are you going to discuss discrepancy in any ratings in the open meeting? And make a decision on a rating through a roll call vote? Again, that's what you would do for your superintendent, right? You would compile ratings and comments into the collective evaluation form. Any discrepancies would be discussed, and any decisions that would need to be made on a particular evaluation that has a discrepancy would be voted upon. And then if there's an unsatisfactory rating in any category, does the board want to set, the standard that would automatically put your business manager on a performance improvement plan? That might be a process you have in place for your superintendent, should there be an unsatisfactory rating in any one of their categories. And then approval of the evaluation generally is a majority vote of a board at an eval meeting. That's what you would do for your superintendent. Would you do something similar for your business manager? So it's really the board's discretion, the format that you would follow, but it could very well be very similar to something like what you would do for your superintendent, which the board should already be familiar with. What's really important is accuracy and honesty, providing accurate ratings and comments. If you've got a satisfactory and an unsatisfactory category, both categories should have accurate explanations, accurate ratings, and that's just good practice. And the comments themselves, there's effective and ineffective comments that are really going to coach an individual toward improvement, or coach them, toward different conduct. Using labels and adjectives without concrete examples, that's not as helpful as if you would give concrete examples. So if you give your business manager an unsatisfactory rating in providing financial reports, don't just say business manager never gives financial reports. Well, never is probably not credible because that's an absolute, and give some examples. On this date, I asked for a financial report and at the next meeting it wasn't given, or I asked for this financial report and that's not what was provided. Examples can be useful and a good tool for communication. Obviously, it goes without saying, don't use words that would give rise to a discrimination claim. And when I say discrimination, I'm talking about those protected classes: race, sex, national origin, disability, etc. Focusing on employee intent, what you think an employee intended to do rather than the result. That could be a rabbit hole because the business manager can absolutely disagree with someone's perception of their intent. So look at the actual result that occurred, the actual conduct. Focusing on the cause of the performance rather than the problem itself. There are times the cause might matter, but a lot of times it doesn't. It's just where are we at and what is the performance problem? And that's what should be focused on. And I talked about using absolutes such as always, never. That it's very rarely true that something always occurs or never occurs. And so avoid absolutes. Using too much middle ground, which is probably the number one problem I see in performance evaluations across the board in private and public sectors. Using a middle ground, hedging of the evaluator, it just shows uncertainty in the decision, and it's just not a useful tool to improve performance or just give valuable feedback. And then including everything an employee has ever done wrong, such as overkill, also can be really an ineffective way to communicate. There has to be something that was positive in the year. Perhaps not, but just be aware of that. Potential pitfalls of choosing as a board or a district not to provide evaluations to a business manager. Well, the number one pitfall is simply, and quite obviously, that performance might not improve and it might have a negative impact on the district. It most certainly would cause increased frustration. If there were a problem, it would cause frustration with employees, the board, perhaps your community. Misunderstanding on interpretation of discussions that have occurred, coaching throughout the year. If it's not followed up with an evaluation, that can be just a pitfall of causing miscommunication and misunderstanding. And then a lack of documented formal evidence for a school district defense in the event of a potential legal claim. Should things go south with the business manager or really any employee for that reason. When you deliver the eval to the business manager, again, and I continue to emphasize it does have to be an open meeting. Upon approval of evaluation by the board, it should be presented to the business manager. It would likely go in the business manager's personnel file. They should be given the opportunity to provide a written response, which would be stapled to the back. And then I alluded earlier, if there's an unsatisfactory category, is the board going to have a policy then that, or a practice that the business manager automatically goes into a performance improvement plan? I would say most districts would probably say yes. And so what would that performance improvement plan look like? Well, that's going to be a separate document, a separate coaching document. But the typical elements of a document like that would have the background, the purpose, the reason for the PIP, an identification of the conduct in question, the area of concern. I always like to identify the policy or legal provisions that the district is looking at in connection with that conduct. And then clear identification of what the expectations and requirements are going to be moving forward, not only for the timeline that might be identified in the performance improvement plan, but also an expectation that this satisfactory conduct is an ongoing requirement of the position, not just a requirement for the duration of the performance improvement plan. And then there should be some clear consequences laid out for not meeting the expectations, the goals, et cetera, of the performance improvement plan. And should the district need to move toward employment separation and or the business manager wants to leave, you can certainly do that, and it is laid out in Century Code itself. The board of a school district may, under subdivision 27 of that provision of the Century Code, may employ an individual to serve as the school district business manager, meaning at will employment, or contract with any person to perform the duties assigned to a school district business manager by law. So the board does that, directly hires, and may dismiss the school district business manager for cause without prior notice, or dismiss the school district business manager without cause with 30 days written notice. So if there's a for cause reason, it can be immediate. If there isn't a particular cause, but it's just time to part ways with an individual for whatever reason that might be, there's a 30-day notice required. So what are the takeaways from that provision of the law? Like I said, the district can hire a business manager as an at-will employee without due process rights or continued contract rights. The district can certainly choose to enter into a contract with an individual, or if you're outsourcing some business manager services. And the law requires the for cause terminations that can be immediate and the 30-day notice for the without cause. For cause termination is not defined in this provision of the law. When for cause terminations come up in other provisions of the law, most typically for cause terminations are supported by some sort of breach of a required duty of the position. I've identified a lot of North Dakota Century Code provisions that lay out expectations of a business manager, right? So it could be a breach of one of those provisions of the Century Code, a breach of internal district policy, egregious behavior, negligent behavior, insubordination, misconduct, misappropriation of funds, et cetera. There could be, a wide variety of for cause reasons that a district feels that somebody in a business manager position needs to leave immediately. But I would say in the event of any for cause termination, the district absolutely has to have it documented and established to have support for that for cause immediate termination. You're gonna look to the documentation for cause terminations, the performance management, perhaps evaluation, any PIPs, that sort of thing. Otherwise, you always can just fall into the 30-day notice without cause separation. The process for dismissal of a business manager, it's a power given to the board specifically under the North Dakota Century Code provision 15.1-09-33. So it is a board action that has to be taken. And it could be just through the simplest process of an item on a regular agenda or a special meeting that is properly called. Board discussion could invite the business manager to provide feedback. I think most districts would do that, and then the board would vote. Is there any room for executive session if you feel you need to dismiss the business manager? I've said it quite a few times, discussions about employee performance, personnel matters, conduct, even financial audits generally must be an open session. What are some exceptions that could get a board into executive session? Specifically, when you're looking at a business manager position and some potential issues that could occur, there are times that an executive session might be appropriate. If there's an ongoing workplace investigation that is not complete, or that 60-day time frame from the date the complaint or concern came in has not been exhausted, any discussion about that workplace investigation or ongoing audit, especially if it's raising some legal concerns, could certainly be an executive session under certain provisions in the Century Code. If there's reasonably anticipated or actual litigation occurring and it is connected to your business manager or something occurring that has occurred with your business manager, you could enter into executive session for that, or attorney consultation about one of the above. But just note, the presence of an attorney does not automatically make a board discussion confidential or privileged, especially if it's regarding personnel performance issues. We have a number of attorney general opinions on this. We've got a lot of attorney general opinions, honestly, about personnel discussions. And unless there is a real valid argument that the discussion is limited in executive session and entirely focused on one of those exempt categories that allows a board to be in executive session, such as the investigation itself or actual litigation or seeking legal counsel on an ongoing litigation matter or something reasonably anticipated, it really shouldn't be an executive session. Discussing the performance of a business manager, discussing personnel issues, discussing whether or not a business manager should be dismissed, most often has to be an open session. And the Attorney General just has been very clear on that on a number of occasions. But if in doubt, of course, you can always seek counsel. I get questions like this quite often. And that's really my presentation on business managers, performance evaluation, that sort of thing. If there are other questions, you can certainly let me know. I can take a moment and wait.
I didn't see any in the chat box either, Chris Ann. So yeah. Aside from those couple that came in on the Q&A box, that's all that I can see.
Okay, good. Yeah, that's all I see as well. So I mean, if there aren't any other questions, that's totally fine. I will go ahead and provide these slides to the NDSBA and they can be uploaded and shared, of course.
All right. Well, if that's all the questions, we will conclude today's webinar. Thank you, Chris Ann, for being here again and presenting. As Chris Ann said, she will provide the slides to us. The webinar recording from today and the slides will be made available at www.ndsba.org. You will need to click on the resources tab at the top of the page and then select the Lunch and Learn from the drop-down box to access them. We will not be having a Lunch and Learn for October due to our NDSBA annual convention, but we will be back here in November. Looks like the topic is still to be determined, but once Alexis finalizes that, we will share something with our members, likely in the next month or so. An email will be sent out with that information on how to register, so watch for that. All right, thank you again for joining us today. We truly appreciate your participation and questions. Contact our office at 1-800-932-8791, or you can contact Chris Ann if you have questions on any of the information you heard today. We look forward to seeing you back here in November. Stay safe and all the best.